Psalm 46. Should be a very familiar psalm. It's one we've preached many messages from. Psalm 46. We'll read the first 5 verses. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore will not we fear, though the earth be removed, though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof. Selah. There is a river, the streams whereof shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacles of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her, and that right early. The Psalms, of course, are songs. We don't usually look at them that way, but that's what they are. And being songs, they, of course, have a very definite arrangement, a very orderly flow about them. And it's no different with the 46th Psalm. It consists of 3 stanzas, and these are marked by the word Selah. And we see that word in verse 3, verse 7, and verse 11. That word is simply a musical pause. It was a call to stop the singing and the instruments and reflect and comprehend what was just sung. It is also a place for the reader, you and I, to pause, to contemplate and give serious thought to what has been said. So this 46th Psalm, relatively short, is marked by these 3 pauses, which shows us the need for these words to seep into our soul, to saturate our inner man, and the need to have these truths embedded in us. The theme or subject of this psalm or song is the overwhelming fact of God. This is established in the first 2 words. God is. And that becomes the keynote. That becomes the fundamental and central fact. That becomes the main idea of this 46th Psalm. God is. And that should be the main idea. That should be the central theme of our life. The hymn, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," is based upon the 46th Psalm. The hymn, "Be Still My Soul," is also based upon this 46th Psalm. So the nature of this psalm or song is one of praise to God. It is a psalm of worship, adoration, and reverence for God. It is a song that expresses faith and assurance in God, and such should be the nature of our life. As you read the psalm, you see the tone is one of certainty. The tone is one of confidence. there's joy, there's calm. And such should be the tone of our life. The chorus of the psalm is verse 7, and then it's repeated again in verse 11. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge, Selah. And that would serve as the chorus, if you will. And then, like I said, it's repeated in verse 11. So this 46th psalm is the writing of one living their life focused upon God. Living life impacted by God. Living life with faith in God. And this in the midst of the daily happenings of life. It's the writing of one who's living life very aware of God. Most people, I'm talking probably 99.9%, live life in oblivion to God. They observe His creation all around them. They see evidence of God all around them, give no thought whatsoever. But this psalm is the writing of someone who's very aware of God. And they are living their life reflecting upon God. God is a major part of their life. God is their life. We see in this 46th Psalm, living life with God as a reality. The Psalm is an expression of great confidence, great assurance. We want to take the thought of the message from verse 1, God is. From verse 4, there is. And from verse 5, God shall. And our subject is confidence in God is, and there is, and God shall. That's where our confidence needs to be. It is confidence in the character of God. God is. It is confidence in the blessed provision and work of God. There is. God shall. It is a setting the heart and mind upon God, enjoying the blessings of God, and anticipating God's work, God's activity. Now, we do not know the author of this psalm, nor do we know the exact occasion or place of the psalm. But we know this: it is very applicable to all of God's people, regardless of occasion, time, or place, because God is, and there is, and God shall. It is a psalm that paints a picture of what the life of a child of God should look like. And again, the emphasis is simply the overwhelming fact of God. I don't know what percentage is of people who believe in the existence of God. But this is more than, yes, I believe there's a God. This is God. This is the overwhelming fact of God. This is, you believe there's a God, and that's overwhelming. It affects everything in your life. For the child of God, reading the psalm, there's a calm, inducing power in its words. We find assurance here. We find comfort. We find strength. We find security and peace and refreshment and joy, and victory and encouragement. We see there's conviction in the psalm, there's courage, there's energy for the soul. So it is a psalm that will strengthen the faith and resolve of the child of God, or should be. So let's look briefly at the setting and circumstances of the psalm. We all have a setting. Life has to be lived somewhere. We all have a setting. And there are circumstances. Circumstances change by the moment. But we see here the setting and the circumstances of the psalm. And though we are not told the specific circumstances that were occurring when the psalm was written, there are several words that paint the setting of the psalm. For example, verse 1, God is referred to as a present tense refuge. A refuge is a place of shelter. It is a place of protection. God is a present tense shelter and place of protection. That is indicative of a storm. It is indicative of some sort of danger. It is indicative of some sort of need. And again, it's present. And He is also referred to as strength, indicative of personal weakness and inability. And He is referred to as a very present help, suggestive of need. And we see there's the word trouble there in verse 1, meaning a tight place, a squeezed in pathway. Things are closing in on you. It's suggestive of pressure. It's suggestive of distress. It's suggestive of unrest and problems and difficulties, inconveniences, trials, heartaches, griefs, sufferings, afflictions, burdens, and on and on. And it is, notice, in trouble, conveying the idea that we're surrounded by it. We're engulfed or fenced in by trouble. Now, the specifics of the trouble are not stated. It just says God is a very present help in trouble. But trouble can have great variety. And trouble can come from anywhere. And it can come at any time. And it can be in several different realms. It can be in the physical realm. It can be in the emotional realm. It can be in the spiritual realm. It can be all of them. And it can vary, and does vary, in degree and duration. In verse 2, there is the resolve of the psalmist. He says, "Therefore will we not fear," which suggests that it was a time of fear. It was a time of angst. It was a time of anxiety. It was a time of dread. It was a time of panic and uneasiness. And then in verses 2 and 3, the psalmist is painting a picture of the severity of the trouble and the fear. And he draws our attention to three images. You have the earth, the mountains, and the sea. Three images. And he proceeds to illustrate the way that trouble can come and the severity of the trouble. In verses 2 and 3, there are 4 illustrations marked by the word though. You'll see that word 4 times in those two verses. Though. That speaks of what follows, though, speaks of great upheaval and disturbance, conveying the idea of terrible disruption, great turbulence, pandemonium, chaos, drastic and unpleasant change is what we read in verses 2 and 3. So you have that word though 4 times, conveying the idea of regardless of the fact or however. Notice, though the earth be removed. This is very mysterious, the earth being removed. It speaks of something that's threatening. There's no place to get away. But God is a very present help. God is our refuge. God is our strength. So it speaks of there's no place to go. And it says, though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea. The mountains. That which we think of as very firm, very solid, very stable. They're dropping into the sea. They're being brought to ruin. And then you read, and though the waters thereof, the thereof referring to the sea, roar and be troubled, that is, agitated to a life-threatening degree. And though the mountains shake, the mountains that are left, they're vibrating, they're tottering, they're brought to a state of instability with the swelling thereof. So you have the earth removed, the mountains carried into the sea, and the sea so raging that the remaining mountains shake. This suggests a cataclysmic crisis. It's a disaster. It's a calamity. You can't get away from it. It's an illustration, it paints a picture of everything spinning out of control. Everything's falling apart. There are times when in our individual lives it may appear that everything is falling apart. And that's what he's talking about. These are menacing things that we read of in verses 2 and 3. They're dire straits. What we read of in verses 2 and 3 would be horrifying. It would be shocking. People could say, I've never seen anything like it. We hear that phrase a lot today. Again in verses 2 and 3, 4 times the word though. And what follows that word, all 4 times, are things much bigger than man. Things that would leave man absolutely helpless. In verse 5, speaking of Jerusalem, notice this, there are the words, shall not be moved. That's indicative of the fact that there was a threat. In verse 6, we read, the heathen raged. The heathen roared, which speaks of their agitation, their wrath, their resentment. And then you have the words, the kingdoms were moved, conveying the idea of violence and overthrow. In verse 10, there are the words, I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted on the earth. Suggesting that it was a time when God was being discredited. God was being dishonored. So these would be the circumstances. But notice the confidence of the psalmist. And we need to ask ourselves, where is our confidence? Where is it? Well, if it's in self, it's not going to hold up in these circumstances. If it's in the government, that's not going to hold up. Your confidence has to be bigger than what's going on. It has to be bigger than the setting. It has to be bigger than the circumstances. In this case, has to be bigger than the earth if the earth were removed or the mountains began to fall into the sea. The mountains began to shake. You need a confidence bigger than that. Something greater than that. Again, the tone of the psalm is one of great certainty, great confidence, joy, and therefore there's calm. There's calm. You look around today, there's not much calmness. People aren't calm. People are very anxious about a lot of things. So the key to this tone, so you have this tone. The key to it, verse 1, is found in the word present. And that word is in relation to God as a refuge, a place of protection, safety, and supply. It is in reference with God, to God being our strength, our power, and our stamina, and God being our help. The word help really enlarges or summarizes the other two, refuge and strength. He is our help. And what is said here is that God is relevant to our present situation. He is a very present help. So it is, God is present. God is present as a refuge. God is present as a strength. God is present as help. And this, for us, He's our refuge. He's our strength. He's our help. So the word present expresses a consciousness of the nearness of God. That's the key to this tone. That's the key to this confidence. It is an ongoing consciousness of the nearness of God. In other words, His presence is more real and more powerful than what is said in verses 2 and 3. If all we have is an idea of God, that will not get you through verses 2 and 3. God has to be a reality. There has to be an awareness of the protecting, enabling power, presence of God. And this is the result of faith. And faith is the key to the confidence. So the object of this confidence is God. Everyone puts their confidence somewhere. People put their confidence in the stock market. People put confidence in all kinds of things. But confidence has to be somewhere. Reading the psalm, the object of this confidence is God. The name God occurs seven times in the 46th Psalm. The name Lord, 3 times. There is the title, the Most High, 1 time. There is the personal pronoun He, 5 times. Personal pronoun I, referring to Him, 3 times. That's 19 mentions of God. He's the focus. He's the emphasis of the psalm. The earth being removed is not the focus. The mountains falling into the sea is not the focus. The object of the confidence and the focus of the psalm is God. And therefore it begins, God is. God is. Verses 1 and verse 5. Verse 5, you see it again. God is. And in verse 7 and verse 11, the Lord of hosts is. The God of Jacob is. So 6 times it is declared that He is. He is. God is always unchangeably so who He is. You can't say that about any person. You can't say that about anything. Only God. And this is in relation to ourselves. God is our refuge. God is our strength. God is our help. It is God is and that He is for us. In verse 5, God is in the midst of her. It is God is, and what He is present for us. Verse 7 and verse 11, the Lord of hosts is with us. And the God of Jacob is our refuge. So there is a personal consciousness of who God is. And that who He is for us. And the whole focus is the absoluteness of God. No matter what, God is. That's a good place to put your confidence. No matter what happens, God is. No matter what happens, God is greater and God is more than whatever it is that's happening. Now, the psalmist expresses his confidence in God. God is. And then you have the logic of this presented. Verse 2 and 3. Therefore, based upon who God is, this is what is logical. We need to live logically. We say we believe in God, now live that. We say God is our refuge, God is our strength, God is a very present help. Well, live the logic of that. That's what that word therefore is. It's the logical conclusion of the fact that's been stated. If we're saying, I believe that God is who He is, I believe He's my refuge, I believe He's my strength, I believe He's my help, and we're falling completely apart, that's not logical. that doesn't back up what we say we believe. We need to live what we believe. What we believe concerning God. Now notice what he says. Therefore, based upon the fact that God is, based upon the fact of who He is, will not we fear? He says, I'm not going to be afraid. The persuasion, the conviction, the assurance that possessed the psalmist concerning God had a powerful impact and influence upon his life. And that is greater than everything that's mentioned in verses 2 and 3. God is. God is. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? People are anxious. People are afraid. Calmness is not in the air. But we need this. God is. I don't know what's going to happen. But hopefully I know God is. And He's my refuge. He's my strength. He's my very present help. He's in the midst. The logical conclusion of verse 1 is, therefore we will not fear. In other words, verse 1 should not just be words upon our lips, but our life. And that is dangerous. It is a danger of those who sit in church week after week that what we hear and what we believe just become words upon our lips, but not our life. It needs to be our life. If God does not impact our life, no matter what we say we believe, what do we really have? I mean, you believe in God, but if it doesn't impact your life, what do you really have? Not much. Therefore will not we fear, though. And then he takes it to the extremes. So the confidence expressed, God is more than whatever follows, though. The impact of the confidence in God is greater than the upheaval. My confidence in God has to be greater than my setting and my circumstances. Otherwise, in other words, what good is it? It has to be greater than what's coming. It has to be greater than the disturbance and the disruption and the turbulence and the chaos that we read of in verses 2 and 3. Our confidence in God. The fact and existence of God and who He is. It should be a confidence that confidence should never be threatened. Even if the earth were removed. Even if the mountains began to fall into the sea. No matter what, God is. And that is so of everything that is said of Him in this 46th Psalm. So reading verse 1, verse 5, verse 7, verse 11, God is. That's the confidence that the psalmist has. And it's a confidence greater than whatever occurs after the those of verses 2 and 3. But there's also verse 4. There is. There is. He says it confidently. And what follows is personal confidence and conviction. There is. There is a river, the streams whereof shall make glad the city of God. The psalmist is speaking of Jerusalem. There is. And this is so, though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, there is. And though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, there is. And though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof, there is. There is something as a result of God. There is. Here the psalmist say in the light and reality of verse 2 and 3. There is. It's an expression of confidence. And what follows is God's provision for His own. It is true, God is. But there is also God's provision for His own. Notice, a river, the streams whereof shall make glad the city of God. This river and the streams that flow are life-giving water. They're always present, in spite of what's going on in verses 2 and 3. It is a picture of peace. Peace. Peace like a river. Isaiah speaks of that in Isaiah 48, verse 18. And this in spite of verses 2 and 3. It's a picture of spiritual refreshment. Though all this is going on, the psalmist is saying there is, because God is, there is spiritual refreshment. Spiritual gladness can be had. Notice verse 5. As a result of what we read in verse 4, God is in the midst of her, the city of God, Jerusalem. She shall not be moved. That's a very significant statement in light of what we've already read. Verse 2, though the earth be removed, the earth can be removed, but she shall not be moved. That's God's protection. That's God's security. We are more established than the earth we walk upon. She shall not be moved. Why? Because of who God is. Not because of us, but because of who God is and what He is to us. Then verse 5, God shall. Again, this is an expression of confidence. It is a confidence in the faithfulness of God. It is a confident dependence upon God. If the earth were removed and the mountains began to fall into the sea and the mountains began to totter, who are you going to depend on? There's only one. And that's God. It is a confident leaning upon God. God shall. God shall. It is a confident cleaving to God. Mountains begin to fall in the sea. What are you going to hold on to? God. He has to be our confidence. It's a confident looking to God. God shall. God shall. And again, all of this is in spite of verses 2 and 3. The psalmist is confident that God would do what He said He would do. That's where confidence needs to be. God will do what He said He would do. You may look around. It may not appear to be so, but that's where confidence comes in. I know it's so. God will do what He said He would do. Where's our confidence? Where's our confidence? So in closing, in this 46th Psalm, the psalmist expresses personal consciousness of God. Every morning that I get up, there should be a personal consciousness of God. God has given me another day. God has given me more time. There ought to be a consciousness of God. Let's be honest. Do we wake up every morning with a personal consciousness of God? No. But we ought to. And there ought to be personal confidence in God. God shall. God is and God shall. And there's great comfort in that. There's strength in that. There's security in that. People want security. People like security. We all like security. There's nothing more secure than God. There's peace in this consciousness of God, in this confidence in God. There's energy there. It energizes us. It gives us resolve. I can. Not because of who I am, but I can because of God. Because God is the strength. It's like Paul said, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. Where was his confidence? In Christ. So what a wonderful life is portrayed in this 46th Psalm. A life impacted by God. A life of felt impact. First 18 years of my life, didn't matter to me if there was a God or not. There was no impact. But things changed. And now, we have a life experiencing God. Not only do we need to know there's God. Again, people will say, oh, I believe in God. Do you experience Him? Is He a personal experience? That's what we're talking about. This is the life that is being illustrated. It's a life enjoying God. As we've said many times, we ought to enjoy God. There are people that I do not enjoy being around. And I'm sure vice versa. They don't enjoy being around me. That's fine. It's one thing to know somebody exists. It's something completely different to enjoy them. You can even have a friend and not necessarily enjoy him all the time. But we ought to enjoy God. We ought to enjoy who He is. We ought to live our lives reflecting upon God. As you get older, you tend to reflect on a lot of things. And as we view our life and see the hand of God in it all, reflect upon that. Not so much the times, but reflect upon the God who brought it all together. The life that's being described here is a life of courage. If you have this confidence in God, there will be courage. There will be steadfastness. We'll just stand. Well, you realize that no one thinks like you do. That's okay. God shall. God shall. And you're steadfast. May we daily experience the 46th Psalm. May it be our everyday life. Brother Ben, if you'll come and lead us in a verse of song.